Let's make my peaks quilt pattern using a layer cake. Layer cakes are 10-inch squares. For this pattern, you will need 42 10-inch squares, yielding a 48-inch by 56-inch quilt. Using 80 10-inch squares will yield you a twin-size quilt measuring 64 inches by 80 inches, giving you a few more options. With each layer cake 10-inch square, you are going to use the 60-degree line on your ruler and slide it all the way to the bottom right-hand corner and go ahead and make your cut. Now, if you have a rotating mat, this will surely help out because you want to turn your block and now line up the 60-degree line on your ruler on the line that you just cut. Then you will slide your ruler until it reaches the other corner on the opposite side, which is technically the bottom left corner. Go ahead and make your second cut. You will now have a 60-degree triangle as well as two other background shapes. Repeat these steps until you have cut enough for the quilt size you are making. Once all of your 10-inch squares are cut, we will now sew everything back together. First, we are going to select a 60-degree triangle in one print, and for your exterior shapes, select a secondary print. We are then going to sew the left unit to the 60-degree triangle with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember, since we are sewing on the 60-degree diagonal, we need to offset our pieces a 1/4 inch. Afterwards, you will then sew the second background triangle to the right side of the unit with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you are a beginner, then this is the perfect block to learn these new angles because afterwards we are going to square our block to a 8.5 inch square. That way there is some leeway if your pieces are slightly off. Go ahead and repeat these steps until you have made enough for the quilt size you are making. Once all of your blocks are made, it is time to lay your quilt out in a 6x7 block layout or in a 8x10 block layout for the twin size quilt. You will only need to lay your blocks out side by side. Then as always, you will sew your blocks together to form rows, and lastly, sew your rows together to complete your quilt top. Here is what my peaks quilt pattern looks like all finished. For the backing, I am using a print from within the collection. Then from the thread choice, I am going with glide threads in the color peach. Here is what my quilt looks like all quilted. Once again, one layer cake will yield a 48-inch by 56-inch quilt. If you use two layer cake bundles and make 80 quilt blocks while placing them in a 8x10 block layout, you will yield a large twin-size quilt measuring at 64 inches by 80 inches to give you a few more options. But if you could, please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.